No, when we got into Guernsey, there was Germans waiting for the captain.
Right.
And the last time I saw, when I looked from the deck, I saw my father walking up the quay with him. That was the last time I saw my father alive.
Okay. Can I, as soon as your boat arrives, your father is arrested, basically, is that right?
Yeah.
And you don't see him again?
No, I never saw him
In the
again.
meantime, the other members of the crew get on with the whole process of unloading?
That's exactly.
Okay.
That was it.
Did he leave instructions as to how you should unload that boat, or were they quite capable of unloading it on themselves? They'd done it so many times, they knew how to do it.
Well, you see, the Guernsey dockers come in, and they come aboard the boat. You see, we've prepared it. If it's bad weather, we've taken the cargo hatches off and everything like that. But see, as soon as we do that, there's the Jersey cargo.
Right.
So they had to unload the Jersey cargo onto the quay and then unload the Guernsey cargo. To give you see, when we were in Guernsey and we weren't going back till the next day, the cook used to have to cook a meal for the crew, and I had to give him a hand, peel the spice. My father, you know, he was a lovely bloke, but he could really drill it into me. He wanted me to be the same. When we left harbour, you know, where's the boy? And I had to go up. Jack Lawrence was at the wheel. He said to Jack, he said, "Nah, you know what's what, Jack? Yes, fair enough." And he was putting me through, using the wheel and everything like that. You know, I was well away.
You mentioned the cook, Bob, and this is of interest to me. The
Pleasance.
cook, Eric Pleasance.
Eric Pleasance.
And you know his history, of course.
Oh, of course.
Yes.
I've known Eric. Oh, he was up at Poland with us.
Yeah. What was he like as a person, Eric?
I don't really know. To be truthful, he was a devil too.
Pleasance was a known fascist.
Yeah.
He was a member of the British Union of Fascists.
Yeah.
So did he ever talk about, you know, his political views?
Not to me, no. Or to the ship.
Nice bloke to get on with, or difficult?
Eric Pleasance had a blonde fella, Lester.
Yeah, Lester. Yeah.
Lester, and they were two together. And as soon as the boat was in Jersey, Lester was there, and they were off. You know, and that was that. In actual fact, Pleasance and Lester came with us to Kreuzberg in Poland.
Right.
You see, but you see, his mind, that Pleasant. He was, I don't know. As soon as he got there, he was telling the Germans, you know, I'd go, give me a uniform, I'll go and fight the Russians for you, you see. And of course they got interested in him, and he was doing this and he was doing that, you see. But he went out of the camp and we never saw him again, and we all shouted, "Good luck, Eric, good luck."
So he left in Kreuzberg. He wasn't there for long then.
Oh, he was quite a while to really get
Was
the
he?
Germans.
Really?
Oh yes. That's very. Oh, see, I cannot.
How did they come to be on your boat? Did they have experience of being sailors? I don't think.
Eric Pleasant said he was a chef. He was a cook.
Yeah.
He was the cook aboard the ship.
That's it.
Oh, and we never complained about any meals. And he was a devil, you know. He was, you know, I've got to, you know, speak because, and it was for the crew. It wasn't really for himself,
Right.
It was for the crew. But if he knew of certain things were coming aboard the ship, you know, in Granville, you know, and he'd nip down in the cargo hold, you know, and cut a big load of meat off, you know, to give us a stew or something. For the evening, I mean, we didn't have any, we only had a little meat ration, and he was that type. He had to be like that.
Was he actually dealing with the stuff, do you reckon, or was he just for the crew? He didn't deal with it outside?
Oh no, he didn't. No. You've got to give me a shot. It was for the crew. Yeah, definitely.
And did Leicester ever come aboard? Did his mate Leicester come on board?
No, never saw him. I never saw him until we got into Kreuzberg. and they were there.
Must have been a bit of a surprise for you to meet up with him again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. What are you doing? What are you doing, peasants, you know? I'm a communist now. I'm going to fight the Germans, the communists.
Is that what he said?
Yeah, I'm going to fight the communists. Oh, yes, all they were, well, all they wanted. Give me a uniform, he says. Give me a gun, I'll go and fight. Yeah, no, dear, you said like that.
When you were in Guernsey
Yes.
and you were unloading, did any of the crew go ashore or did they all stay on board?
Oh, some of them went.
They
But
did.
there was nothing, you know, there was nothing in Guernsey, nothing they could sort of go to or anything like that. Because as soon as we were loaded, we were off.
Yeah.
You see, we had to pick up the Guernsey cargo. When we got to Granville, the Guernsey cargo was on top, the Jersey cargo below, and it went on and
But
on.
that
and on.
that particular weekend when your dad got killed, were they all on the boat that weekend? They didn't go ashore that weekend? None of the crew?
They were all asleep.
Yeah.
You see, this is the difference, you see. And another thing you must bear in mind too, I'd like to say, and it wasn't their fault or any reason like that at all, but the Evening Post, anything written, especially like the accident about all the shipping, was censored. It had to go before the Germans before they could start printing. And you must remember that, because a lot of people say, oh yes, but the Evening Post said, the Evening Post had to do what they were told by the Germans.
Now we've got a copy here of the inquest from the Guernsey Evening Press, and that indicates that there were members of the crew giving evidence at the inquest. Is that correct?
Oh, well, that could be at the inquest. Yes, it could be.
Do you know when that
Because
inquest
you see,
occurred? Was
what-
that like on a Monday? Your father dies on a
Sunday early
Sunday,
morning.
and then
Saturday
the
night.
inquest is on the Monday, perhaps? Yeah, but what was the time period between your boat arriving in Guernsey? You're saying goodbye to your father as he's arrested, and his death. It's all within like a few hours, isn't it?
Or could have
Yes,
been
it's
next day.
quite, it's quite,
Could it have been next day?
no, it was early, well, not early morning. You see, I think this all happened at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah,
something like
that's
that.
right. 12:40, I think.
Yeah,
The question is that the report in the Guernsey Press, which comes out on a Monday, says that your father died on the Sunday morning, round about 1 o'clock in the morning, 1 to 1:30.
mhm.
Now, that means that the unloading of the boat and your arrival, if it happened on the same day or within 24 hours,
It was.
you'd have got into Guernsey on Saturday. But the report is saying Thursday.
No.
What?
Not at all.
No.
They were two officers.
They came almost as soon as the boat arrived.
Yes.
They came along and got your
Yeah.
father. So it's round about
Yeah.
4 o'clock.
Yeah.
Now your father, in your report, didn't get back to the boat until very, very late. In
Yeah,
fact, it was actually
It was.
early Sunday morning.
It was very, very late. Very late.
Now, why was he so late in getting back?
Ask the Germans.
Because the report in the Guernsey Press describes him as coming from a hotel. Why would he be at a hotel?
Says you had tea with the harbour master, it said. That's what it said there. Do you remember anything about that?
No.
No.
Now that hotel could be one of the hotels which was taken over by the Germans. So maybe, do you think he might have been taken from the harbour master's office at the harbour to another building
I
for further
don't-
inquiry?
Going back and, you know, what I've been thinking about it and all the rest of it, I don't think he went to the harbour office. I think he went straight with the Germans.
To another place.
Well, yes, but the Germans, like in Jersey, they take over a hotel.
Yeah.
And they took over a hotel in Guernsey,
Yeah.
and that's where you go. You see.
Now, if he came back at about 1:30 in the morning,
That's right.
it's a very long time, isn't it? Do you think they were they questioning him for all that time?
That I couldn't tell you. That I couldn't tell you.
And then he came back, and voices were heard by the boatswain. And that's what roused the boatswain, and he went up on deck.
You see, that there again, you see, they've most probably made the reporter or whoever it was writing that paper there, they were telling them what to write, not what they wanted to write, you see. And I've always said that. Why did they keep him so long? Number one, the dockers would have been cleared, the cranes wouldn't have been working. Now that gangway, every time we got to Guernsey, had to have the crane to bring it in position and put it down to the boat, because it was too heavy. It was one of the Guernsey heavy gangways.
With rails on the side.
That's it. Now, the point is this. How did they get the wheels of the gangway over the lantile? And the lantile was, well, like that. Now, how did they get two big wheels like that? And it required a crane every time we got it to move the, what you call down, the gangway down, and place it in position. Now, how did they do it?
Why wasn't that gangplank continuously attached to your ship?
It couldn't. It couldn't.
So what happened when you arrived in the harbour?
We arrived at certain tides so that...
Yeah, but what was the state of the tide when you arrived on this particular day?
I would say it was about 4 hours before low water.
So where's the ship vis-a-vis the top of the harbour?
The quay.
The quay, yeah.
Oh, well, you never knew, eh? If it was a 38 foot, well, it's a certain...
Because normally you'd have your, because you lost your gangplank in Granville. Normally you'd have your own gangplank.
Yeah.
So presumably when you came in you could put your own gangplank.
No,
no,
not in Guernsey.
You couldn't in Guernsey?
It was awkward.
Was
it?
It
was awkward for the unloading. Yeah.
Really?
We had to have that big gangway on the end.
So that gangplank couldn't be lifted without a crane.
Exactly, exactly.
So if it tipped, how was it tipped?
If a man would have walked on that gangplank with the wheels up against the lantile, the gangplank would come down and touch the lantile, then it wouldn't go any further because
it would jam.
It would jam.
Yeah, okay. So without a crane, the wheels had to be on the land side.
Yes.
And there was no way it could tip.
No.
Now, tell me, why was that gangplank not attached all the time as soon as you arrived? Because you arrive, how do you get off the boat?
Say there was an emergency.
Well, no, you arrive.
Well, yeah,
how do you get off the boat? You've got to go up. You've got to organise the dockers and so on. Presumably, someone says, "Let's put this gangplank in place," and they put it in place. Up goes the captain to talk to everyone, and it remains in place throughout the time the boat's there.
Yeah, with the state of tides, that was all arranged. We wouldn't come into Guernsey on a low water because we used to have to wait till half tide,
yeah.
You know, before the dockers could. It was all timing, because for the simple reason is the dockers in Guernsey will be waiting. They've got to get it all undone. They've got to get it loaded again. You know, all in the day.
So when your father came back to the boat, he would have known from the position of the gangplank that without a crane to move it, he couldn't get back on the boat.
Exactly.
But the question is, why was that gangplank back on the land side and not attached to your boat? Who moved it back? Because when you arrived, you must have used it. You must have got off on the gangplank.
Yeah, the gang.
At what point did the gangplank get put back with a crane? You probably say, in position, ready, because the tides are moving. Explain that bit.
Well, you see, it's a matter of calculations all the time. Now, when the dockers had finished, we never overstayed in Guernsey. As soon as it was finished, we were off to Jersey, so first thing in the morning, the Jersey cargo would go on, and we would leave, and we would go down to Granville, and we'd unload, and then pick up, and go. That's how it works.
In Guernsey, like most quays, they've got these little ladders on the side of the quay, haven't they?
Yes.
When you first went in, because you'd have sailed in, could you have climbed up there? Could the captain have climbed up that ladder?
Oh, you can, yes.
Is that what he possibly did on that day? You have any idea?
Could have.
Could have. And then when you'd gone in close to the quay, I mean, obviously you'd had fenders or something on the boat, when you to keep away from the quay. You could have got off the boat and climbed up the ladder.
Yeah, but when you've got a crane, let me please try and explain to you. You've got a gangway, and it's on the side of the boat, and you've got two wheels there like that. Now it can't go.
Right.
It cannot go. Right. We come in. We come alongside the harbour. Right. We're all ready for the dockers and everything. Now the crane comes along and he lifts the gangplank and he goes down to re-tie it onto the boat, like that. And the wheels are this side, not that side. That's why we needed the crane to get the wheels over to the cargo hold. Now when the cargo was finished, that was taken back onto the quay by crane before the dockers go home. And we're left just tied to the quay.
So wouldn't your father have known that the only way he could get back on the boat was to go down the ladder on the side of the quay?
Well, I don't know. That I can't say. There's one thing I do say is this. When it was all over and I was sitting on some ropes at the stern of the boat and the boatswain came round and he told me, he said, your father, he said, I've got to tell you this, he said, it's going to hurt you, but he says, your father knew that he was not going to get on the ship at all. And I asked him why. Well, he said, when the alarm went, all the ship was quiet and everybody was getting down to sleep, right? When all the noise started, the boatswain came out on deck and he saw my father sitting on the end of the gangway. Now, he shouted out to the captain, what are you doing sitting on the gangway like that? He said, I can't help it, they're forcing me, or something to that, extent. And the lanyards that we used to use on the gangway, my father had made 2 half hitches. And I can do it now and show you. Like that, killed. Passed his hand through, and with the other hand you pull it tight and you've got a what you call. Now if that was on the gangway and he made the keel and he put his hands through and he pulled it tight like that and he did it with the other hand, when the boatswain and 3 or 4 of the crew with the lifeboat on the ship's lifeboat was looking for him in the harbour or the gangway, they found him and he was going out of the harbour with his hands tied to the gangway. And that's how he was brought back in, with his hands tied, and he knew what was going to happen.
When you say he knew what was going to happen, he believed he was going to be killed.
Yes, I'm sure of it.
And to
there's nothing he could do about it.
And how do you think the Germans were intending to kill him?
Well, I don't know. Or whether they thought that if he went down with the gangway and out and up the other side, that would teach him a lesson, I don't know.
But the gangplank, as you say, couldn't have fallen because it was wedged.
Yes, but the what you call was over, and who put the two wheels, the seaside, over the land tile?
Well,
it wasn't the dockers.
And who saw
you're
that?
saying when he came back, you think that maybe it had already been moved.
It had been moved.
It had,
He saw him on the.
You're saying the first thing the bosun knows is when he hears this bang, the crash of the gangplank hitting the boat.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you said previously that there was a conversation between the bosun and your father sitting on the end of the gangplank.
Yeah, that was before he tied his hands.
Yeah.
did the bosun see him tying his hands?
So what brings the bosun up from his below decks?
It was the gangway hitting the side of the boat.
Yeah, but he spoke to your father beforehand, didn't he? He'd already spoken to your father, so he knew the father was up there. He knew the captain was up there, so he must have come up before, mustn't he?
Yeah.
Strange, isn't it?
Would that gangplank, well, because it was a very heavy gangplank,
Oh, did that have the crane?
Yeah.
Did that have the crane?
would such a heavy gangplank actually float? Wouldn't it sink?
Oh, it was wood. It was all wood. It was only
But it had the metal
wheels.
The metal wheels
The metal wheels.
and the railings at the side.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that drag it under?
Well, it wasn't tip-top floating,
No.
you know, but it was going
It was
out.
buoyant.
And my father's had his both heads tied, one each side, when they brought him up.
It says in the Guernsey Press a report that the German lifeboat was also launched. Is that correct, or is that untrue?
I never heard or anything
No,
about
okay.
it.
So as far as you know, it's the Spinell's lifeboat that's put in the water
That's
to rescue him.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned, Bob, that another man was pushed overboard.
Yes, that was Paddy, Irishman. But I think it was, the excitement that's doing this or doing that he went over. But
So purely by accident.
Yes.
Is he on the lifeboat?
He was
Yeah.
on the ship's lifeboat, wasn't he? The ship's lifeboat, that was, wasn't it?
He's on the ship's
Yeah.
lifeboat trying to look for your father, and
that's
maybe
right.
he falls over.
He did.
So there was nothing shady about that. He
No,
just fell over.
nothing shady about that at all.
At one point, you say that there was more going on board the boat than even the captain knew about. What did that mean?
Well, I don't like to. The man's not alive to do that, but the mate Collins, he was a devil. He was a devil. He'd have done anything, I think, to have been skipped of the ship.
Really?
So he was after your dad's job.
Well, I don't like to talk about a man that's dead.
Would it be
I'll tell you one little thing though. When I lost my rag with him, when I was leaving the ship and all, and I said, one of these days, Collins, you'll be found dead too. And it was after the war was over and everything. I read in the paper that Collins, forget his initials, Collins, the printers of Vine Street, was found dead outside his shop. That was such a...
So, a bit of divine intervention.
At one time they were coming back from Albany, and they ended up, what was it? I think it was 18 miles off of some little town in England.
Did it?
Oh yes, there was a lot put about that.
Really?
Oh yes. I'm not sure whether he lost the job after that or not.
So misnavigation.
Yeah.
Was that when your dad was still on the boat, or after your dad?
No, he was Collins was then.
So he more or less did get command. He more or less got command. He got command.
Yeah, he did. That's why.
So how far would Collins have gone to get your father's job?
Oh no, I wouldn't put it that way.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I know what you're saying.
But you don't think so? Yeah.
Mind you, he didn't do anything really quickly to help. It was the bosun,
No.
you see, and it was always a sticky thing.
I'll tell you what puzzles me, Bob, and I was talking it over with these guys here. Your father comes back late at night. The bosun sees up on the pier a rather stout man. You describe him as, I think, quite a fat man. And behind him there are 2 or 3, perhaps 4 German sailors. And they're with your father, they're in the area. But your father, of course, has got away from them. He's at the end of the gangplank. Now, then the noise of the gangplank occurs. And the Germans start shouting that there's a man overboard.
There was no...
The point I was going to make, Bob, is this, that if it's the case that your father went over the side, as we know he did, if the Germans had actually been responsible for pushing him, why would they bring attention to it by shouting, "There's a man overboard"?
No, I think actually we're getting muddled up, or I haven't said it correctly. When the gangplank went over the side with my father's body on the end of that gangway, with his hands tied on the gangway, it went down into the water, and on the way down into the water it was a slack tide, and the crew had gone to bed and thought everything will be all right, the ship will just leave the quay, and when the tide rises it'll come back again. And they were all to bed. Now the gangplank leaves and it hits the side of the boat, such a hard blow that it woke the bosun, and he woke a couple of the crew, and they came out on deck, and it was then the Germans were shouting, "A man overboard."
No.
Now that's the straight thing. Now then.
So there's never any discussion between the bosun and your father on the end of a gangplank?
No.
So that's not true, that never happened.
No, it's never happened.
That's just the invention of the newspaper.
Yeah, well, or being told.
Yeah, all being told
What
to tell a
say.
story.
So let me get that straight. So the story that the bosun, who was waiting up for your dad, he was napping on his bunk, but he wanted to be there when
you can say that now.
No, the mate stayed up. The mate stayed up. The bosun went to bed. I think the mate stayed up.
So did the mate, from what I can gather in your report, the mate is catnapping on his bunk, waiting for your dad. He hears voices on the quayside. He goes to see what it is, and at that point he sees your dad sitting on the end of the gangplank and asking for help. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
Because that's what you say in your report.
Well, I must have got it from somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, must have been.
And so the mate goes to get help from the rest of the crew. And while his back is turned, he hears the bang on the side of the boat. And that's your father gone overboard.
Well, that is right, because the bosun says that he woke up. So that's all I know.
It was the bang that
because this
woke
is
him up.
how he told it to me.
Now, what I thought, Bob, you tell me what you think. If there were a group of Germans who decided that they were going to, one way or another, hurt or even kill your father, who put them up to it? And if they were intent on killing your father, murdering your father, why would they bring him all the way back to the boat to do it? Where there was the risk of being seen by crew, and certainly if they did wait until they brought him back to the boat before they pushed him overboard, why would they then draw attention to it by shouting out? Surely the obvious thing to do if you've just committed a murder, you get the hell out of it as quickly as possible and as quietly as possible. Could it have been just a tragic mistake? They were fooling around. He was afraid, and in the messing around, he lost his balance and fell overboard.
No, he didn't fall overboard.
He was definitely pushed.
No.
Definitely pushed.
It puts, I can put that all down as a load of what you call.
So he was definitely murdered.
Why would my father, sitting on the end of that gangway, make 2 half hitches and put it around each wrist and pull it tight on the gangway so that he is really strapped to that gangway?
Because he'd asked the mate to get help. And maybe the help he was after was to get them to pull that gangplank down, and he tied himself.
Now, how on earth would my father, as a skipper, adventure onto the end of a gangway at low water? Because he knew that if the gangway went over, if it missed the back of the ship, it would go down into the water and up the other side, and he'd be fine.
Well, that's why I'm saying that because there was that risk of the gangplank dropping down, just to make sure, he tied himself to the gangplank so that if he couldn't make it on board, he could be pulled back up and go back on the pier.
Oh, he couldn't be pulled back. If the gangway went down, if you understand, I mean, that's the wall of the harbour, say there, like that.
Yeah.
And this is the seaside. Yeah. So therefore, if the wheels are this side, if the gangway goes that way down and around and up, it can't. I mean, he can't ever get out of the water.
So the gangplank wouldn't hit the deck of the boat?
No,
because the boat is too far out.
The boat actually, it was low water, and the boat, it moved out of the quay like it does sometimes, you see. Now the gangway comes down and it goes underneath, but it didn't quite go underneath, because if you understand, how can I show you? This is the quay, yeah. And this is the boat. Now, as the tide will go out, if it's not tended, there's always a seaman or the bosun, they're on their different watches, you see. But it got so late that the bosun said, well, come on, let's just turn in, and if we heard anything, we'll get up. Big tide, you can check the tides, big tide, the boat had done that from the quay. Now, she's pulled down from there and she's pulled back like that, so she's gone that way with the tide and she's like that. Now we got the gangway here, and they decide that they're going to put it over the top. Now they had to decide that before my father even got there. I don't give a damn what anybody says, because anybody would walk on that gangway with the wheels alongside the lantile and it wouldn't go down. So it had to be over the top. And how they got it there, well, God only knows. In any case, there was 5 or 6 sailors, German sailors on the quay. What were they doing there? you know,
Were they Navy sailors or merchant?
Navy sailors.
Navy sailors. Right.
Naval, oh yeah, naval.
Well, could it be that, let's think of what might bring them down. Would they have been an escort to bring your father back to the boat and make sure that he got back safely?
Oh, okay. Well, that's up to you. Yes, that is a
Possible.
question. That is a question, you know.
Could they have been friends of your father's?
But if they were friends of my father's, and they had taken him away from the ship at that time, and he'd been with them all this time, right up till about 1 o'clock in the morning, or 10 or 11 o'clock, whatever it was. Why? Why did they want his company for all this? Why did he want, you know, it's all right, you know, it's easy sometimes to think these things, and you've got to think them out, because my God, I've thought it out all my life. And I can't. There was definitely, they were either going to give him a fright, a bad fright, and any time they'll want to do something in future, it won't be quite so hard.
I tell you why, Bob, because even for the Germans, to commit a murder would have meant incredibly serious repercussions for them.
Yes, of course, and that's why it was so well done.
But that's why I feel it wasn't well done, that they were taking, if they actually murdered him, surely they would have done it in such a way that they wouldn't have been found out.
Mm. Well, they weren't found out.
No, they weren't found out.
Well, we don't know. We don't know. We don't know the...
No.
There might have been some action taken and covered up by the Germans.
I'm sorry, but I've gone through my mind so much, and I haven't really, you know, troubled about getting it done at all. I've told you, and I find that he's had no recognition at all. Never turned around and said, you know, this was the crew of the Sonia, and you know, we should remember the job they did. Nothing at all about it. And then that's what's made me, in my mind, vexed, because, well, I went through it afterwards as well. I mean, and I'll tell you an instance. I was all about leaving the ship, and Albert, he was a naval officer. He was in charge of customs and that on the pier, and he was a good lad. Talk to you, you know, and have a bit of fun and that sort of thing. And was in England for about 4 or 5 years, you know what I mean? And Bob, so I went over, I said, now what have I done? He said, be careful. He says, you're being watched. Now I'm warning you. He said, I'm not playing today. He said, watch it. I said, okay. And I knew then that I was one, and I was a ruddy fool, really.